out for us to not only get past the immediate challenges in healthcare, but I would also say the health of economy will only get benefited when we are actually able to use science and technology to really leapfrog the current challenges that we have. So in that sense, I think the role of our FICCI's Science and Technology Committee is very crucial. We've been organizing these seminars by different verticals, and the current one, especially on the health challenges, is extremely important. And with the distinguished panelists we have today, I believe we'll have some very interesting outcome in terms of where things are, what are the global practices, what can India do, and how do we really see the benefit of this particular vertical into the lives of all of us. So again, not being an expert in this field, I would leave it to the experts to really take us through the rest of the panel. Thank you, Abhay, for giving me an opportunity to introduce everybody. And may I now request Dr. Vikram to really take this through the next set of sessions. Vikram, please.
Thank you, Sanjay, and thank you all for taking the time out. So, Abhay, is it good to go live now?
Yes, we are live, in fact.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much. And what I've done is I have put together a series of questions that arose in my mind, and obviously I bounced it off with some of the committee members here. And what I want our esteemed panel to do today is to give your perspective as to how we can navigate this journey together, right? I think India is at a big cusp of R&D, research and development, especially in the medical field. We also know that this year has seen some significant changes happen, including the passing of the telemedicine guidelines from Medical Council of India, as well as from Niti Aayog. And with that and the digitization of the data and the number of improvement in vaccine search that is going on in the country and abroad, I think the time is ripe for us to start looking at what can we do together along with the government to kind of look at the R&D policy and help bolster R&D in India. With that in mind, we have two in the panel. We have two doctors and two PhDs. So two masters of research and two medical folks. So there can't be a better panel than this. And it's very high powered. So I have to choose my questions carefully. But we'll start with the doctors because I'm a doctor and I have my soft corner for doctors. And in the medical field, and this will be interesting for all listening to us, surgeons are considered gods. But if there is a god of gods, it is the neurosurgeons. And luckily for us today, we have Dr. Rajkumar Deshpande, and he's going to be the first one I put on the spot. So Dr. Deshpande, a question for you, this is something that I have been observing for a while. And I thought that you are the best person to answer this. So today, a lot of the research we have and the markers we use, the biological disease markers that we use, are based on the research which has been conducted in other countries, primarily in Europe, Americas, or even Japan. And those are the three areas I see a lot of research coming in. And I know that we in India have also started doing our own research to decide our biological markers purely because the genotype, phenotype, and the environmental conditions in India are different. So I just wanted your perspective as to where we are on this journey and what can be done to accelerate that. Because, where we need to intervene for an Indian patient may be very different from where we need to intervene for a Caucasian genotype. So I wanted your perspective on that, sir.
So thank you for the wonderful introduction. We are not gods. We are just probably well-trained tinkerers. We tinker with the brain and the spinal cord. I mean, basically what I would like to tell you is my perspective or my take on what we think we should be doing as far as our Indian research is doing. So let me give a small overview of the 130 crore Indians, 1.3 billion population. Our genetic pool is definitely unique, and it's been well documented that the Indian phenotype and genotype differ markedly from those of the Caucasian, to some extent the African or other populations. And to what I understand is especially the rare disease types are almost 7% or 6% of the population. So some degree of research has gone into that, including ICMR, a lot of some connection with private industry, but basically it's all related to government institutions and ICMR. Now, what happens to other disease process other than rare diseases? Common diseases like tuberculosis or diabetes, for example, the calculated percentage of Indian population eventually that will have diabetes is a third of our population. You are looking at a population of, say, 400 million having diabetes eventually. That is an enormous burden. It is larger than the whole United States population. So if only an institution like ICMR were to do the research and then allow it to percolate, what we call as a top-down approach, I would feel that it will take a very long time. So what is it that we need to think? We need to probably suggest to the government that they should open up the research scenario in such a way that on one hand, you have educational institutions along with hospitals and the industry. They have to come together, and not necessarily only government hospitals, even private hospitals can participate. If an incentive is given for private hospitals to be a part of the research process, it is being done, but in a very minute scale. So I would urge the people in the government to consider enlarging the scope of research to include private companies, private hospitals, private medical colleges, to come together to attend to the needs of Indian population per se, rather than subserve what has been published in the West. Now, typically what I see is happening is, to make it absolutely frank, and I hope this is not a yes man committee. So what I'm saying is, if you have a research that is done in the West, we tend to do a variation of it in our country, and we therefore get recognized for doing that variation. We can encourage people here to do research that is far more relevant to this country, rather than take a part of what is being done in the West, as Vikram was just suggesting. I think if an incentive is there to encourage people in the fields of science, medical science, and to encourage people not just in government sectors, but in, say, private sector, and you can handhold the industry with an incentive for them to conduct research, not just name a laboratory and then, the money is given some tax break or something, but to truly look at how this coordination can be done. I think we will have a substantial body of evidence to say that we can add so much value to our population and their disease control.
Excellent thoughts, Dr. Deshpande. So essentially what you're saying is that the top-down and the variation-based approach has to now evolve into a more research for India by India, and building a framework where everybody can get involved. So we have all these other institutions apart from the government institutions and ICMR who can also get involved, especially on the private side. Because I do see some of the hospitals already, doing a lot of research on the data they have,
correct,
right? For diabetes especially. So you are saying a continuation of that policy, which can be more broad-based and get everybody involved.
Yeah, and the thing is, for some reason, it is probably the British kind of era that's happened, that the top-down approach should become more flatter. Whatever is being done, it takes a long while for the data-driven research and their programs to percolate to the middle level and the lower level of industry or the institutions. Now, that is taking a long time. If we can do a much flattening of that pyramid, then the standard of care is likely to improve fast. And that will happen if there is a greater, greater kind of involvement of the government and the research activities into private hands. Now, what happens is, typically the ICMR money or the government DST grants tend to go to government institutions for research. It's not that the private hospitals don't get, But I think if the data is given openly, you'll realize that it's a very small and a very minuscule part. I think there's a large body of bright people who eventually end up being in the private sector, whether it's a medical college or a private medical company or an implant company, and we can generally raise the level of awareness such that these companies are not looked at, if I can use the word, with suspicion from the government. We should encourage greater participation, which will be an open-minded participation.
Thank you, Dr. Deshpande. I think that's a great initial point. I want to get Dr. Chandrasekhar here for this because, incidentally, ICMR, which has done so much research and is also now working very aggressively with private players as well as getting educational institution into free, I think, which is India's untapped potential. So, Dr. Chandrasekhar, a question for you. You just mentioned when we introduce ourselves that you've started now even seeing products out in the market. So how does ICMR keep up with all these changing research? And do you would like to comment on what Dr. Deshpande mentioned, and what else can be done to increase the quantum of research in the country overall? I know ICMR leads it, but what else can be done? How can we get everybody else involved? Dr. Chandrasekhar, I think you're speaking on mute if you're speaking.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So responding to the question that ICMR and other organizations are funding more research in the government sector rather than the private sector is not entirely true. We do fund private organizations based on merit. And I don't even want to say that the merit doesn't exist in private hospitals and institutions. It does. And our funding from private medical colleges and private institutions and NGOs is substantially very, very great as compared to the government institutions. So we keep a very good balance and we don't discriminate people based on their organization affiliation. What we have been doing in ICMR is that we have been funding and coordinating, especially the innovation activities with the engineering medical colleges, starting from IITs and other good engineering colleges which have potential and which have any concept or proof of concept that we actually ignite and we support them by giving grants. And we also provide them the technical support that is required and that is possible from our end to give to them. And we have seen and we have tasted a lot of success in this also. Another thing is that what we have done in these previous 5 to 7 years is we don't have in-house capabilities for many things that we, as I told you before, we were doing a lot of proof of concept and other enhancement of science kind of a funding. But now we have involved other organizations who have helped us in commercialization. We have an MOU with FICCI. We also take help from BCIL. We take help from other organizations who have been in this business for a long time, and we have seen some good results based on this. So this is what we are trying to do, whatever potential and possibilities and the technical expertise and the funding that we have, we are trying to synergize this with all the other available and required strengths from other organizations, and we are trying to move forward and definitely will make a substantial dent in coming years.
Thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar. I think your thoughts are pretty much in sync with Dr. Deshpande's thoughts. So that means we are moving in the right direction, which is good to hear. The follow-up I have, actually, I'll have a direct to Dr. Kamala Rai now. We've seen R&D spend, at least in the West, go up substantially. And we also see R&D spend as a percentage of revenue also remain high, right? And the good case in point is Novartis itself, which is, I think, if I'm not wrong, it is the number one in R&D spend and number one in the percentage of R&D spend as a percentage of revenue. So Kamala, the question is, now we have Dr. Deshpande doing a lot of research, and he's working to willing to work with ICMR willing to work with private entities. We have one happy family. But how do you maintain that momentum? Suddenly I'll see the momentum of research in India will go up. But how do you maintain it, and what are the factors that you have to watch out for now?
Yeah, no, thanks for this opportunity to be amongst all of you and to listen into various perspectives. Abhay, I think the question on how do we maintain momentum, year on year, it's 20-21%. When I joined the company 13 years back, it was 20-21%. It still is 20-21% even now. I think it speaks to the legacy and the vision. So let me take you back a little bit. So it started off many decades ago. The company started as a chemicals company. Then it moved on to a pharma company. Then it diversified into a diversified healthcare company. And now there's a lot of consolidation within the company and now we are trying to reimagine medicine. So what the company has been doing is it's invested a lot in the discovery platforms, a number of advanced therapy platforms. And now the vision is very clear. The vision is, let's focus our efforts on becoming a medicines company. Let's consolidate our efforts. Just to give you a perspective, a product of, we operate across various therapy areas, right? And then what we try to do is look at the white spaces across various, disease areas. Just to give you a perspective, I've made some notes here. About 20,000 known proteins are, of the 20,000 known proteins, only 3% are targeted by drugs today. So out of the 20,000 proteins. And 10,000, we have the 10,000 known diseases, out of which only 500 diseases have therapy. So the rest of is all white space. So I think what Novartis has been doing it consistently, and if you look at the portfolio of the company, forever it is invested in first in class. I mean, the definitions we use in our drug discovery language is first in class or best in class. So we always want to be, so we're looking at transformative therapies. We're looking at therapies which are game changers. So now, if you look at the platforms, there are large molecules, there are small molecule platforms. Then we're looking at cell and gene therapies, we're looking at cell therapies, gene therapies, we're looking at targeted interventions. So I think we're trying to understand human biology a lot better. And in trying to understand human biology, also trying to integrate that with advanced technology, trying to unearth or trying to unlock what goes on, let's say, for example, within a cell, and how to kind of, develop great markers that predict disease, for example. So we're trying to use a lot of digital tools to predict diseases. So with all of this, the success rate or the new launches that we've had, that keeps helping to refuel and repurpose our own vision. So the vision is long term. Even now we have almost a 10-year vision, and the vision is to be a focused medicines company. There's a lot of investments in the space of technology. So there's a lot of acquisitions, there's a lot of partnerships, and we have, I think, even mix. I think even if you look at the financial discipline of the company, I think there are a lot of financial fundamentals. I mean, I'm not a financial person, but I'm aware that the fundamentals in finance, be it the operating margins and how to consolidate that, how to increase that so that you have enough cash flow within the company to fund your ideas. So there's a lot of ideas that come. So we have a significant amount of the portfolio. As you mentioned, we have a very, very big portfolio, and Evaluate Pharma, in fact, pointed out that by 2024, we have a significant portion of the global, new launches will come from Novartis. So Novartis will continue to remain number one for the next few years. So I think the emphasis is rigorous discipline, because when we look at drug discovery and we look at that kind of spending, it's a lot of diligence, a lot of discipline, a lot of not just financial discipline, but scientific discipline as well. And also more important, to fail early. So when you fail early, then you don't waste you don't lock up your resources in expensive phase 3 programs, for example. So I think there is a lot of incentive for scientists to fail early. So that's also the cultural transformation within the organization, that is okay to fail, but fail early so that you don't, you unlock the capital that's locked in everywhere, right? So I think it goes back to the fundamentals, Abhay, on how we manage our day-to-day work. I think the diligence, be it the discovery side, even on the development side, the way we recruit our trials, even to speak to the COVID, all through COVID, although there was significant disruption in how patients reported back to the clinic, the disruption was very minimal because I think we quickly adapted to the digital tools, because many years back, the leaders within the company wanted to invest in digital. So I think the adoption of digital was much earlier than I would say the other pharma sectors. And I think although we still are, compared to other tech giants, that kind of digital adoption, it could have been a lot different. But I think Novartis made significant progress there, and that helped off. That investments helped off. One is culture. So that we are allowed to fail early and we kind of keep the momentum and the financial discipline. That is one. Second is digital transformation. And then, of course, the asset maximization and the portfolio prioritization, right? We prioritize on areas which have transformative potential. The gene therapy, Zolgensma, for example. Those are the kind of avenues we're looking at. When it comes to, it has to be a game changer. So the assets that we are looking at, the people initiatives that we're looking at, the financial discipline and the rigor with which we approach the portfolio, I think those are the fundamentals. We stick to basics, and I think that fundamentals have helped us. I think that is where we are. And I think it's that 21%, I'm confident will continue in the next few years because the pipeline continues to be significant. Our preclinical pipeline as well, it's very promising. So yes, so it looks good for the next few days. With merging of technology and healthcare, I think that as well will hopefully unleash and unlock a lot of potential for healthcare.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kamla. I think you pretty much gave away the framework, right, of how it would work. Alluding to the point Dr. Deshpande and Dr. Chandrasekhar was talking about, very, very, very helpful. Just hold that thought because I'll come back to you, because I want to go to Dr. Rishi now. Rishi said there's a lot of discussion about tech and medicine. Very unlike people, or at least when I was growing up, these were two different streams, not talking to each other. Even the floors used to be different on the school, where the biology sections were and the computer science sections were. But today we can't separate both. Dr. Deshpande alluded to it. Dr. Chandrasekhar obviously talked about working with the IITs. Kamla extensively talked about it. Dr. Kamla talked about it, how tech is an integral part of their momentum strategy for R&D. You have worked extensively with a lot of bodies, including the Future Tech Panel and NABH. How do you see this model at the confluence of medicine and tech working? Do you see an interesting R&D model there, or what are your thoughts around it?
Yeah. Vikram, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor that Dr. Deshpande, Kamlaji, and Dr. Chandra is there, and I'm speaking in that panel. See, there used to be a time when technology was very different stream than medicine and the medical care and other things. But to be honest, especially in the healthcare and the medical sector, technology has always been a very, very strong partner. And these two have really worked well. And most of the time, the technology has been first used by the medical professionals. So that distinction, that how the technology will not be part, or it's now synonymous. You can't think about healthcare or medical profession without having technologies. I have most of the time when somebody is going to do some kind of research, you will need technology. And I think I am coming from the connectivity or the communication or the IoT kind of Internet of Things kind of technologies. And when the machines become connected, that has really resulted in a much bigger revolution and the kind of change that has started happening. Now, because of COVID, I think it was a boon that it forced us to start using the remote patient monitoring in India. And the government also had to put these kind of norms to allow people to do remote patient monitoring. And with the remote patient monitoring happening, many kind of new technologies started coming. But Vikram, if you start seeing, I still remember, these health Fitbits and all those kind of things were coming, and we are a big market. And we must realize, I'm a US-based company, started in India. I'm a joint venture with a Japanese company. We started in India just because India is a huge, huge market. So the moment we do a research and get a technology IP done and start implementing it, while the cost has always been a challenge here, at what price I can sell things in India. Okay. But because of the huge market, we have been able to get these kind of technologies into India. And to me, healthcare has been so united that the moment something happens in the United States or in Japan, it is available here. So these, that synchronization, or, there's sync is already there. The two part, which I just want to mention, is more of, while the people are thinking about the instruments, people are thinking about devices, which are very much there, and how to get it connected is what we are trying to do to make different kind of commercial models. The mobile apps, if you start thinking on those lines, I have recently seen a mobile app, not recently, but few months back, I had seen a mobile app to check the glaucoma. Okay. So people have been really waiting for their numbers, and people were not able to do those kind of tests. It was a very long process to get this done. Every 6 months, somebody is supposed to go and test. Now there's a mobile app. You can just test it yourself and you can do it. Okay. And, Dr. Chandra was also talking about the IITs and the funding that has been done. I have 2 points. I met one of the IIT R&D guy who had been able to create, and sir, Dr. Deshpande, it might be good for you to hear this. He had created a very small chip, a small, like a fingertip. It was a very thin one, which is put onto the spinal cord, will be able to detect which part of the body is having a pain. Mm-hmm. So for a terminally ill person, if that has been put, you will be able to tell which part of the body that person is suffering from a pain. And the problem both of us were trying to solve was that it was only for 2-hour battery. How can we make it at least for 24 hours? Okay. And that is what we are trying to solve. So the thing is, what I'm trying to say, that while there is an investment that has been done, and I have no doubt about this, that people are making a lot of investment in R&D, how to make it commercialized? I can guarantee, maybe within ICMR also, and in thousands of research scholars, research done by IITs and other institutions, they must be lying in the cupboard. Okay. And if somebody can sit together and try to see how can I commercialize it and scale it, it will benefit millions of people. Okay. The last thing is, I just want to say 2 more things. Sorry, Vikram, I'm taking more time. The first thing is, I met a large institution in the United States, which is trying to see, when a medicine, when the research starts to see what kind of medicines can be prepared in the salts and the things starts happening. From that time to the time when the production started, the commercial flow of that medicine, it is a long time. They have been able to create a complete AI-based framework by which the time frame from 5 to 8 years has been reduced to 1 to 2 years. Okay. Those are the kind of technologies, if we can start inheriting in India, they might help our researchers to come out with the commercialization of a product much faster. Okay. The last thing which I want to say is, I met a startup in the United States, in Silicon Valley, which I usually go and just spend time to learn from them. And, we all must have heard a story that, in Ramayana, Hanuman met his son when he was, Makardhwaj was the name. And when he said, oh, I'm a bachelor, I never married to anybody, how can I have a son? He said, when you are flying from the ocean, your sweat went to a crocodile, and that's how I was born. And I am sure all of us must have heard of this story. I have a startup in the United States which has been able to test from sweat all paramedical tests with 99% accuracy. Okay. Imagine the revolution. You will not be required to get a pinch on your, get a blood extracted out of your body. Okay. So there are so many things in Indian history, and I don't want to call it mythology. that, if we start doing research on that, I'm sure we'll be able to do many wonders. And I was really surprised, and I could relate that story that, the sweat could bring, as on date, they are doing 98% accuracy of lipid profile, kidney function test, liver function test, and so on and so forth. Okay. So how can we adopt it? It will be a revolution to me. If you were, if you are not going to get blood sucked out of your body and there will be no pain, just a sweat, and your testing done. So we are waiting for such kind of research to get commercialized. But the technology and health, medicine, no way, it is no more, you can't segregate them. Another point which I want to make, Vikram, is the 5G technology. Okay. We are really working. India is quite behind it, I admit. But in the United States, in Japan, in Korea, and many other countries, the 5G has already been tested, deployed, and many places. It will, again, the two use cases which you always talk for commercialization for 5G. One is in the healthcare, the remote operations. Okay. And that will make life so easy for everybody. So I'm finger crossed how soon we can have those things in India. But the medicine and healthcare and the technology, they are totally synonymous today.
Thank you, Rishi. I mean, I think some of these examples were brilliant. Reminds me of two things, right? One is, I have a glucometer and I have a family history of diabetes. Though I'm not even pre-diabetic, I keep testing myself. The only opposition comes from my wife, who says there's nothing wrong with me in our family. Nobody's ever had diabetes, the typical explanation we give. And her fear is not diabetes, her fear is the prick. Right. So hopefully the sweat gland based, at least blood glucose level check should come to India soon. That way, all of us can stop pricking ourselves. And the other thing, I totally agree with you. As a matter of fact, I'm working with the industry body to look at all the projects done by students which are lying dusted up in the cupboards. Engineering students, medicine, we don't do any projects, and that's actually going to be my question to Dr. Deshpande. But in engineering, they do a lot of projects. A lot of them are on healthcare. They get graded and they are gathering dust. So our objective is to see if some of them could be commercialized and help them in the startup way. But Dr. Deshpande, back to you. One question I've always had is, as a student of medicine, and I graduated from Manipal nonetheless, I never participated in any research.
Right.
Could be because I was not, at least inclined, or nobody even asked me. But if I think back to those days, none of us ever participated in any research. We did our, Viva, we did our clinicals, we did our theory, and we did the term exam. And that is enough for us to be given a degree in the end, after 5.5 years. My question to you is, should that policy be tweaked? Because if I'm seeing so much confluence and we see IITs participating, tech participating, but on the other side, our own, on the medical side, our policy does not really talk about research. Should we then request the government to start looking at how to change the policy for even for medical, so that we can get students involved in research at a relatively young age? At the end of the day, they're trying to solve a disease. They are fighting. I mean, it's a noble cause, but research is a critical part of that cause.
You're right, Vikram. I mean, I also go back into my medical days, and we were just interested in passing the exam. And to be fair, if you pass an exam, everything is good. Failure in any exam, or failure in any project, or failure in diagnosing was considered a crime. And I say that Dr. Kamala said the right thing. We should learn to fail, not as intentional failure, but we should not be afraid of failure. Once we say we are not afraid of failure, in spite of our efforts, we should take it as a positive feedback. Then I think our attitude towards passing an exam or going towards experiential learning is far better. Now, in regards to the projects in medicine, we are still stuck in many, many ways into really what we call as a customary medical learning. A lot of things have changed. Software technology can be used for learning in a very big way. I'll give some examples. what Rishi was telling to and alluding to was the use of technology in what I call, in the simple word, explants versus implants. Explants is far easier. Implants is a different subject altogether. Explants could be in diagnosing disease. It could be, for example, using the Microsoft 3D, vision technique, where you have, for example, if I want to discuss a case, I want Vikram's input. I use him as a expert in diagnosing a disease or reading a scan or something. You have this new Microsoft thing. What do they call? Where you have a 3D virtual reality person standing by the side.
AR, VR, HoloLens?
Yeah, something like a HoloLens technique. Yeah. You can use HoloLens technique, commercially available, not in huge prices, for medical colleges to learn anatomy and learn disease. That's one thing we can do. The second thing we can do in medical research for learning is expose the medical students to see how the pharmaceutical industry works, how the implant industry works, and how statistically it makes a difference for them to learn just not a cost benefit analysis, but to understand realistically where we are heading. None of us are tuned to industry methods as doctors. We are completely blindsided. We have no clue. Right now, what happens is we were importing till 1991 everything from the West. There is a supplantation in India now, but it is still inadequate. So to encourage people to think other than their tunnel vision of clinical medicine, is there a way we can include in the curriculum things that will make benefit for the industry, but have an understanding of human anatomy and physiology? I think that transition, which again Kamala was talking about, Dr. Kamala, the transition should be in the mind. You should encourage the engineering in a doctor, just like you encourage doctor in an engineer. We all have cross specialty interests, which we killed over time because of needs of our education, the ability not to fail. All those things will make us just having a tunnel vision, and we end up doing it. If we can encourage people to take, say, a professor to take a sabbatical for 6 months, or assistant professor to go learn what is to be done in an implant industry, and he comes back, he can think and say, what is it that I can do to make my patient better? We have absolutely no cross-fertilization happening. If we can get that lab industry or something, whatever, doesn't matter, in the explant sphere, it will definitely gradually spill over to the implant sphere. Another thing I want to tell, what Rishi was talking about sweat. You can do genetic diseases with just a hair pulled out. You can check for diseases. You can check for hormones in the hair. So there are examples. There are technologies available, but most of us are not even aware of it. How do we make this explosion of technology is using technology in the classroom. You should get top of the line technologies available for medical students, so they have an ability to have its cross culture across different specialties, not just inside medicine, but by marrying mathematics to medicine or even chemistry to medicine, in such a way that the young guy who has the ability to have multiple outlets of excellence are encouraged. We do not encourage our people to think beyond this. Can we think of ways and means where a person whose abilities are across different spheres, how do we identify those people? How do we encourage them to work in their minds to get these things together and say, look, if you do that, you get an incentive for doing it. Right now, it's a disincentive to think about it. It's exactly the opposite of what I'm asking about.
Correct, Dr. Deshpande. I think it's a great point. I'm just putting Dr. Kamla on the spot here. So, Dr. Kamla, what do you think of this idea?
Yeah.
He said pharma. I said, okay, let's put you on the spot.
Yeah, sure. I think I have a lot of points to make, but I'll be very quick. I promise you that. This is a great discussion. I will say one thing. My son just graduated from, he's a doctor now. He graduated from Manipal. And I must really compliment ICMR here because ICMR has dispersed a lot of it has ignited a lot of students to take up, this micro budgets for various projects. And he had done an ICMR project, that covered his basic expenses. And that's a huge incentive for a young man to go and explore. You may not qualify that as great science, but the fundamentals on how to write a research proposal, how to submit the research proposal to ICMR, how to, that is such a big thing. So I think from the government side, there is a lot of things happening. I think there are a lot of senior people who are coming in the middle. They are not channelizing or energizing the team. I think there is a lot of blockages in the system. It's more of human potential leadership question. I think we need to revisit how we value our talent, because when I also teach at Manipal, I also go there. So I addressed a group of interns last year as soon as they passed out, and what is it that they can look forward to. And I saw a bunch of 3 or 4, 5 medical students, very young. They had already had a surgical club. They came and they talked to me. There are a lot of questions on technology. So I think it's time for, actually, it's not anymore just the teacher holds the entire thing on the student. The student has got a multimodal learning from various avenues, and maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's other avenues. It's not just one teacher who's holding the students' knowledge. It's coming from multiple sources. And I think it was really brilliant to see students coming and asking a lot of critical questions. They're not afraid to challenge you. And I think the new crop of Indians, young Indians that are graduating, they're not afraid. And that is what I've begun to see. And I was very impressed that the quality of questions that were coming through, they were not afraid. They didn't have this, oh, ma'am, thankfully that didn't happen. They were unafraid. They had bold questions. And I think this crop of Indians, if they are now raring to go. And I'm sure there's a lot of potential in our country. And I think, there is, of course, on the discovery side, maybe we need to develop skill-ready talent. Maybe I'm being overtly optimistic, but we need to bridge that. How do we get our talent to be industry-ready, right? That's a question I think we need to urgently address, because the latest report I saw, it's not latest, actually 2017 report, I saw that 66% of our graduates are not industry ready with the skills that the industry needs, because industry today is looking at data sciences, right? Exactly as Dr. Deshpande alluded, technology. How do you get a doctor to think like an engineer? How do you get a doctor to think like a data scientist? How do you get a doctor to think like a technologist, right? So I think all of these, it's a confluence of all of this. And I think positively, I was very impressed with the young doctors of today who have already realized this. They're ahead of us. They're ahead of me in their thinking. So I think I'm optimistic. I'm confident that the future of India should be bright as long as we channelize the energies. We need to get out of the way, in short. All of the senior folks need to get out, because I think we are bad practices for the ones. I mean, we need to stop. We need to get out of the way, and we need to just sponsor the ideas. That's it. Our job is just to sign the check. I think as long as we're willing to do that, the future is really great for our country.
Thank you, Dr. Kamla. I think good to see Manipal leading the way. I mean, I've always kept in touch. I think, and the news just yesterday was also pretty interesting. Manipal is still chasing Apollo, so it's good to see on both sides they're winning. Definitely, Dr. Sharath Rao and his team they're doing a phenomenal job at the KMC part of it. But I want to get in Dr. Chandrasekhar here, because I think you brought up ICMR and Manipal, and I think this is I did not know. I visited Manipal recently before the lockdown. I did not know ICMR was working with them. But Dr. Chandrasekhar, this is a good example of how ICMR is working with a private institution, an institute of eminence, nonetheless, Manipal. But how are you building this ecosystem? What's your roadmap ahead of getting more private organizations, especially medical institutions, involved? I know you have the IITs covered, but what about medical institutions, especially the private ones?
Yeah, to put things in perspective, the fundamental that we do in ICMR is to promote good science from wherever it comes. To give you a figure that even in the government institutions, the government medical colleges, we fund only 10 to 15% of the total medical colleges that exist in this country. It is primarily because we have people there who are interested in science and they're interested in good science. Other medical colleges, there is hardly any good grant that comes to ICMR for funding. As we are very competitive and we are very, very strict criteria for what we need to fund. Taking this forward, any good grant that comes from the private medical colleges or private institutions, which could be an NGO also, we fund them. We don't discriminate based on their affiliation, as I said before. Our fundamental is to fund good science from wherever it comes. And if it is coming from a very, very different kind of institution, we take extra efforts, we walk an extra mile to fund them so that we want to promote that part of science, and that is our commitment. So saying that how we are moving towards funding good science, and that is the cardinal principle, and we abide by it and we stick by it.
Thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar. So what you're trying to say is putting that lens of public, private, government is a wrong way. If the science is good, ICMR is behind you. If your science is not good, we are so sorry about it. Wish you luck elsewhere.
Yeah, we are not sorry. In fact, we do support those people to write good grants. The story doesn't end. In fact, we take this as a feeler for our side, that if somebody is writing a proposal and he is not qualifying, we do handhold and we do support them for them to make a good proposal next time.
So as long as the science is solid, you will support them and make sure they get there too.
I would not say we support. I would say that we don't discriminate.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar. That is very, very good too and refreshing to hear. I have a question for Dr. Rishi then. Rishi sir, there is, obviously we say digital, we say technology, we say all these wonderful things. But on the other side of the fence, one of the reasons healthcare has been insulated so far, I'll say so far, is because we still rely on a lot of paper records. I think the minute we go full-fledged digital, and I'm not talking about large institutions like Fortis or ICMR. I'm talking about all the nursing homes and hospitals that dot India's landscape. From a security, especially cybersecurity perspective and a data privacy perspective, considering all this data, medical data can be heavily misused. Where do you think we are, and what kind of changes we need to make in the framework? Especially what kind of regulations does the government have to pass soon enough for this?
So, Vikram, you have asked multiple questions and you are saying only one. So I'll try to answer them. So Vikram, I met a lot of doctors in the United States. And it was so surprising to me that in their hospital, they're still using the old pager. Okay. And they were able to communicate with each other. Okay, you are required here. Okay, there's this. And this was a small pager which was lying on their belt, and they all are still using it. While we have been able to develop so many electronic health record systems and so many things, and they are not being used. Okay, because so I asked them, and similarly, if you have realized, now the doctors are talking to their patients through a WhatsApp, and you are sending your X-rays to a doctor on your WhatsApp. So how can you make things easy is the only answer to how can I, imagine, my uncle is a doctor in Lady Hardinge Medical College. And every morning in the OPD, there used to be 1,000 people standing in front of him. Imagine if he'll start typing, he will not be able to handle that much of crowd. So the first thing is, how can I make life easy for the doctor who is supposed to use it, not for me? I need data for something, for research, for this and that. But the person who's supposed to enter the data, the things should be easier for them. And the pager being still used in the United States in many hospitals is an example that it's an easy device to use. And WhatsApp is another one. So that's one part where I say that while we are making things digital, while we are trying to create so many portals and so many systems, how can I make them easy for the doctor who are going to use it is something which is still lacking. So, and that's what, people like me have to work and innovate. How can I make their life easy? So otherwise, all these electronic health records and all those kind of systems will remain as a system. And for that mass scale scalability, it will not happen. Okay. Now coming to your specific question on the cyber security and data protection, privacy especially. Okay. The first thing is there is only one state, not country, in the world which has come out with a cyber security law, and that is California. Okay. So while we many times keep on thinking about India not moving ahead, but in the whole world, there is only one state, not country, which has come out with a cyber security law, and that is California. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is the legal framework is very weak. Okay. While we all understand that the cyber security is a very big threat and we all need to work on it, the legal framework is still very weak. And I am admitting it that it's weak and we need to work on it, and the government has to work on it. Okay. That's part one. The part two is on the what governments are doing. Okay. Government of India under the NABH, which I am also part of that committee, started the National Digital Health Standards Committee under NABH. This is globally the first committee has been formed by any government to create national digital health standards. Okay. And as part, so I'm using the word globally, only one country, and it's going to be the first of its kind. And I got an opportunity to work on it under the, NABH is the organizing committee. There are only 14 people who are working. So on the interoperability, on security, on privacy, and how the information will flow. And because when you are talking about digital, the data can come from a device, it can come from a phone, it can come from a mobile app, it can come from multiple ways. So we are trying to create the complete standard across how different channels will be there, who will be the user of it, and how the privacy will happen. Okay. So first, from the healthcare perspective, we are not working on a policy, but we are working on a standard, which can be accredited or adopted by a provider. And when you think in terms of India or maybe anywhere else in the world, you have hospitals, you have clinic, and you have individual doctors, and anybody can provide digital health. Okay. So you are sitting at home and you're a doctor and you are advising, and you can use your mobile and you can do things. So from that level to a clinic to a hospital, how can we create a standard for an individual doctor providing healthcare, digital healthcare? And that's what we have been working. As per the timeline, Vikram, the NABH is currently now for template, formatting it and will put into the public review and public comment as per the regular process. We are expecting the comments will be available by the end of December. Then it will be tested on 2 or 3 hospitals, clinics, and individual doctors. And maybe by mid or early next year, we are expecting the standards to be launched. That's where we are. I want to take another minute on the data privacy or data protection. Okay. Many countries have come out with the data protection acts, and Europe has been far ahead, and especially UK, which has come out with the GDPR, some standard guidelines for standard policy for the data protection. On a similar line, in 2018, Dr. Sri Krishna Committee was formed, and they submitted a report to Government of India for the data protection. It was supposed to be tabled in the Parliament. The standing committee started working, and now it is in a position that I had a meeting with the Honorable State Minister for Communication and IT, and we all were requesting how soon can we have that. Okay, so we are expecting, because of COVID, it got delayed, but we are expecting this to be, approved by the Parliament, and that will come as a legal framework for the data protection across India. Okay, so we can expect. I was expecting it to happen today. Last time when the Parliament was in session, was because of the COVID. It was not considered the highest priority one, but it got delayed. But that Data Protection Act for India and something like a regulator, like we have a telecom regulation, we have a stock exchange regulators, we have a insurance regulator, we will have a data protection regulator. That's what has been formed. A complete legal framework with guidelines, with regulations will be there for India. And we are expecting it to come very soon, is what my expectation is. This is where we are.
She said this, the only confusion is, does this cover R&D data as well? Specifically,
it will cover R&D data.
Okay. All right, excellent. That is good news. I knew the data protection thing was out, and I know Disha is also, it's somewhere in the pipeline. I think it's dependent on the data protection thing. So finally, we'll have information security for healthcare also coming out. Probably will be the second country or the first country after the state of California to have our own law. So this is great news, and it's great to have an inside view, as to what is happening. So one final question to Dr. Kamla Rai before we open up. I'm seeing a lot of questions have come in the chat window for us, so I'll try to pick up a few from there. But Dr. Kamla Rai, one question for you. You heard Dr. Deshpande, you heard Dr. Chandrasekhar, you heard Rishi talk about all the changes that are happening and the changes that are going to happen. You yourself said we should get out of the way. But what do you see as the, how do you see technology changing the research? Apart from getting out of the way and putting a framework, what else are you seeing from a new normal perspective?
Yeah, I think one is it's forcing us to get upskilled in data sciences and digital topics. For example, I got some certifications recently on understanding of data sciences. Very rudimentary skills, but at least to the extent that I'm familiar with the language, I'm familiar with what goes into data science as a science, right? So I think one is to be open to new learning, to be very curious. So that's more on the self-awareness and transformation, personal transformation, and the ability to really take off your medical hat and get your other skills. That's on the one side. But on the other side, I think fundamentally to have large scale, it goes back to the vision. How do you craft a vision where you integrate digital technology, data science? And I'll just give you a flavor of the stuff that's going on right now. So we're looking at, for example, omni-channel marketing strategies, for example. With COVID, it has forced us to really go into that mode because, but this was started even before COVID. So I think that speaks to the vision of our leaders, that it's not just COVID that propelled us to go digital, full throttle into digital or turbocharged digital activities, but I think it's also, apologies, my video is not on, so I didn't realize that. Sorry. So if you look at the number of multi-channel, looking at predictive algorithms. So even in the clinical trials, I'll just give you a flavor. We have so many million years of patient years from the various clinical trials. I think Novartis is the largest repository of clinical data. So trying to create data lakes around this and trying to see, yes, in clinical trials, there were these standard questions. Does this drug work or no? But then we collected a lot of data. Can we hypothesize around the data and say, are there any unanswered questions built into all that data? So we're creating data lakes, for example, and that calls for real deep skills. And I think it also looks at how you look at the entire technology space, right? Partner with tech giants and look at skills, not just in machine learning, but in NLP, in AI, look at predictive algorithms on how, and if you do great science with great technology, you can have great predictive, it can become predictive science, so that you can have your early, even your adverse experiences can be predicted better through AI tools, for example. So it will really reduce the pain for the patient and also for the treating physician. So I think there are so many avenues just explode. I think there is just an explosion of ideas and ideation in this space. If you look at the business models over the next few years, Novartis is very clear that it wants to save a lot of money, so the productivity margins are better. And how does that happen? It happens only with digital. And thank God for this digital intervention that I'm able to speak to all of you through digital. I mean, otherwise, traditionally, we would have done it on a face-to-face. We would have got on early morning flight. The entire day would have probably been wasted. And then for a 1 hour session, maybe, of course, it would be great to meet you all in person. But I think the essence is this is the future, whether we like it or not, we have to adapt to this new normal. And I think embracing technology in its truest essence, I think it will make our lives easier. It's no need to be fearful of technology. Yes, there are these naysayers who keep saying, oh, technology will really, it's doomsday, stuff like that. I disagree. I think if we use it, it's like any tool. If we use it meaningfully, purposefully, diligently, carefully, responsibly, digital is really a great, and I'll give a perhaps a very crude example. If we give a surgical knife to Dr. Deshpande versus if we give a surgical knife to me, right? It's going to be a different scenario because I'm not skilled in the surgical side for many, many years now. So I think it goes back to who receives the skill. If it comes to me, maybe it'll be useless to me. But if you place that technology in the right hands, it's going to be really very meaningful for humanity. And I think, as I said, right, I mean, there's so much to be done. I think if we don't adapt to this new normal and technology and embrace it and look at the multimodal avenues, be it digital launches, digital recruitments of patients, we're looking at patient-centric trials where it's remote trials, for example, how you monitor patient progress remotely, how is the interaction between the doctor and the physician, patient and the physician, what is the virtual engagement like, what are the interfaces, what are the digital interfaces, and of course, I'm glad Rishi brought out a lot of GDPR topics. It is very, very pertinent. We should be aware of the frameworks. We should build a system where it is not misused, where data is not misused, but I think it's very powerful to use this. To all, I think it is the only way forward to adapt, to embrace, and to embed and to go deeper, to really immerse deeper into digital experiences. So I'm excited, although I'm not such an, I wish I had much more, I wish I had made a lot more, progress in data sciences much before, maybe 10 years before. But nevertheless, there I durustai. I've just, this year has been a great data science year for me. And I do hope I'm invested in the next few years to upgrade my data and also digital skills and understand how digital disruption means to healthcare and what can I do to play a role? How can I shape this? So yeah, I think it's very promising and I'm very, very excited.
Thanks, Dr. Kamala. So what we'll do is we'll pick up a few questions that have come up on chat. Some of them are pretty tricky, but I think between us, we should be at least get a sense of how to answer them. I'm not taking the basic ones, right? Because we have already discussed a lot of that. Now, one of the questions has come on biomedical academic research, especially coming from the IITs, and probably this is a right question for Dr. Chandrasekhar. So, there are a lot of tech schools and not IITs, sorry, they're talking about NITs. How can they overcome barriers like standardization and ethical clearances and clinical trials without registering themselves as an organization, right? How can they overcome those barriers? And is there a provisional, registration that is available for securing IP? So, Dr. Chandrasekhar, any feedback on this question?
You see, there are few requirements that we have for funding any project to any organization. If it involves human subjects, it has to be cleared by the ethics committee. Government institutions and most of the private institutions we take as having the DSIR clearance for doing medical research or for that matter, any research. So we don't insist much on that. But if it is the requirement is the ethical clearance, then it has to be abided. And we have kind of a arrangement in which any institution which doesn't have a ethics committee of their own can approach any other ethics committee in the same city or beyond and get that approval. So we honor that. Besides this, we have very small requirements as to be who is auditing the organization and few other things which are okay. But ethics committee requirement is a crucial requirement. So we have to have that. And we do encourage people and support people if they find any difficulties in getting the ethical committee approval. We help them to do that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar. That was really helpful. Uh, the other question is also slightly on the technical side. It's dealing with Tedesco for the approval for Class C and Class D devices. But at the state level, there is lack of manpower to approve Class A and Class B devices. How can an entrepreneur or somebody who's starting out take on this challenge? So it's more to do with manpower availability for approvals, Dr. Chandrasekhar. Any feedback on those or any recommendations?
As far as I know, this is to be done online, and they have now a provision that if anybody doesn't hear from them after a certain period, it should be taken as approval. That is something is on now, and people have taken advantage of that because there is a issue of manpower, or maybe there is too many other things to be taken care of. Anything that is not responded within a certain period is taken as granted. Did I answer my question?
Yes, I think you did.
Yeah.
So that is very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
One question for Dr. Deshpande. Specifically on the confluence where we have with the remote patient monitoring, and as you know, doctor, a lot of almost 70% of the visits for the patient is on checkups. Is there a way in which you can create or institutionalize home healthcare for monitoring such patients, and what is the steps you think are need to be taken right now?
I think it's a wonderful concept of home care by itself, because patients who require long-term care, elderly patients who require support systems, patients who get discharged after care in the hospital. I mean, there are a lot of issues or a lot of patients who require supportive care at home, who are otherwise visiting hospitals and wasting time, effort, money, and both socially and emotionally. They can be cared for at home. A lot of initiatives have been taken by the hospitals to start home care programs, but these are all individual initiatives. These are not perfectly monitored. These are not digitally supervised. And obviously, the standards are all across the board. So can we think about having a program wherein certain standards are met, certain monitoring is done according to national guidelines, and is there a way, just like telemedicine became an issue as a requirement for consultation with doctors, is there an aftercare program that can be brought up in a digitized way, wherein whether it is app-based or with nowadays you don't need a special camera. Your phone can act as a camera. So is there an app-based way that aftercare or a home-based care or a virtual care that can be given based on parameters that are required for, say, post-surgery or elderly care or care for the dying or the bereaved? So many things, can be standardized. And whether this can be done in a way that has a certain natural sequence, natural progression, not just now I have a startup company which gives 10 nurses, another startup has got 3 doctors and 1,500 nurses. Not like that. It is something which is across the board standardization. So everybody, whether it is in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, or Uttar Pradesh, can follow an app-based standardized methodology to do. Then you can have an idea to what extent this can be improved upon, because this is an absolute need of the hour. There is shortage of nurses in the hospital, shortage of beds in the hospital, shortage of specialists in the hospital. If a aftercare program can be developed where one doctor can cater to say 200 patients on the app versus in the hospital, one doctor can cater to 10 patients, you'll have a huge and an absolutely different model that can work. That's what my thinking is.
Thank you, Dr. Deshpande. I think that is a very important point, the standardization point, right? Because standards of care cannot suffer just because you can't take that as an exception. Unfortunately, someone once told me that Six Sigma doesn't work in healthcare. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
So
Vikram,
that
if I
brings
can
me
add
to,
just one point here.
I was just coming to you, Rishi.
Sir,
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry, but sir, I was hearing this. The most important part, in addition to the standard, is the commercial model finalization. Okay, how a person getting a care at home will be charged, and what kind of the way the institution, the hospital or the clinic or the whatever be the way, will get financially benefited by doing it. Okay, because while the resources are there less, there is a challenge everywhere, but because the commercial model is still not finalized and that's not in place right now, that has really hindered people to start this in a mass level. Okay, so we have been trying to work on seeing what can be a different commercial model where it is win-win for all, because the country needs this remote patient monitoring or the patient care at home. The hospitals are so there's so much of stress on them that they also need, and the patient will also get a care. So while all three will get benefited, the commercial model is still not finalized. And that's what we are currently working and trying to see how can we bring that on board to make it a success for all. Sorry for entering here, Vikram.
No, I was actually going to come to you only because the next question was for you.
Okay.
The question is it's slightly tricky. So, you're working with so many industry bodies and the government for technology standards and security standards, etc. But is there is there a model you see in which you can identify technology partners, especially in the non-organized sector? Suppose it's not from the startup ecosystem, for example, or somebody from the MSME segment. If I'm not working with the big technology providers, which obviously they come with the audit and like Dr. Chandrasekhar was saying, he's few things you look for. You have ethics committee, have you been audited, all that. But is there a model there that is currently in place?
No, Vikram, honestly, there is no model right now for identifying a ecosystem partner. And when you're talking about startups, there are different norms people are using right now. That framework is still not there. But, it's a very good point, Vikram. We'll take it up in our future tech panel and see how can we create a framework for any institution or a company to find our ecosystem partners, which can include large enterprises plus startup communities from different parts of the globe, to select them and have them as a partner. The structure is still not there.
Excellent. Thank you. Because I thought if somebody would know, it would be you. But I have not heard of a model in place. But I think this is a great discussion. I just want to have key closing statements. We'll start with Dr. Deshpande and Dr. Chandrasekhar and come to you, Rishi. Dr. Deshpande, closing statement. What does India need now?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It was a great discussion. India needs to think differently. From the doctors, from the engineers, from the technology perspective, and from the way we look at both success and failure. We should look at things in a way that will benefit not just what we think is our surrounding people in Bangalore or Karnataka, but look at the whole population. Our representative sample of the country is 1.3 billion. If we make a change to even 20% of the population, you are looking at 250 plus million people. That is more than multiple countries, maybe more than 70% of Europe. What we are hesitating to do is to experiment. We are afraid of experimenting. We want to experiment if you're successful. We do not want to experiment because we might fail. So I have a feeling that if we can think straightly differently, if we can put our thoughts, we are not coming together. Engineers, doctors, technologists are not coming together. We talk, but we don't come together. We need to meet frequently. We need to discuss ideas across, whether it is a garage sale, whether it is Starbucks or a hospital canteen. We need to meet, we need to plan, and we need to put effort into this. If industry can meet with the doctors, with the engineers, and with the medical schools, I think we have a recipe. Somewhere something has to give. If something gives, we are in the business. We should not fail this time. Our generation has failed. Our people, at my age, I'm telling you, we have failed our people in many ways. The next generation should not be allowed to do this. That's my closing comment.
Thank you, Dr. Deshpande. I think you're very candid words. Dr. Chandrasekhar, any final closing statements?
The only closing statement that I would want to give, and I'm not coming as a closing statement, this is the beginning statement. The statement is that the opportunities are there to innovate. There is a scope for innovation. There is a scope for getting the funds. We are always there. We will be very, very proactive to support any good ideas. I want to take this opportunity through you that anybody who has good ideas, a concept, would be funded adequately and would be supported. That's the only way to move forward, and I promise you that.
Thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar. I think I can repeat it for everyone. Like Dr. Deshpande said, Dr. Chandrasekhar said, don't hold back. Just because the previous generation or currently it's not being tried, that doesn't mean it will not work. Right? There's so many examples from sports and even medicine where procedures were tried. Dr. Krishnan Bernard is a great example. Dr. Valithan, living proof. Dr. B.M. Hegde. And there's so many doctors. Dr. Deshpande is here, who looks more like a rock star. But he is, these are all living proofs that you don't need to hold back and push ahead if you have an idea. Dr. Rishi, closing statements from you.
Yeah. So, Vikram, I have two statements or two sentences. First, whenever I'm coming to Bangalore, I'll be going to Dr. Deshpande's hospital and see a surgery happening.
Welcome,
so that I can.
Welcome. I would love to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, that it will be a learning for me, and definitely I'll be able to think what I can do more.
Bring Ravi
to help him.
And Vikram.
Yeah, I will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a while since I stepped into the OT, Dr. Deshpande. So it's a good fun to watch.
Seriously, we'll make it.
Yeah. The second thing, Vikram, everybody agreed that the doctor needs to become more engineers need to become more doctors, and there is an industry. That means we need a future skill. Okay. It's more of how can we cultivate a given environment where the mechanical engineering engineer or electronics engineer, the industries are combining. And there's an amalgamation of all these industries happening. The future skill required might not be only doctor or only engineer or only communication or an IT software programmer. There's a need for a combination of all of these. And that's what my last statement will be, that we as a team have to work for the future skills and see how can we create those skills that our academia work very closely with the industry and see how can we help in creating those future skills, which will not be only doctor, only engineer, only IT, only communication, but a combination of all. And that's what we have to work on. That's my last statement.
Brilliant, Dr. Rishi. I think those are words well said. Ravi sir, any words from you? I think you've been totally neutral, but no discussion is over without your input.
No, I think this was a fantastic session. And I am able to sort of correlate to what each one of the participants actually said. And I would possibly weigh it in gold. The question is, when and how are we going to make all of this happen? We are running short of time. Speed is the essence. Question is, how do we get together and start implementing, at least in baby steps, so that India in the next 10 years can see the difference? in terms of dispensation of care and democratization of care.
All right. Excellent, sir.
I have Atul sort of lined up with his thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Hi,
Vikram. Hi, Vikram. Fascinating discussions in the last 90 minutes. It has been like a lot and lots of thoughts. I definitely want to thank on behalf of FICCI to all our panelists. Great stuff like Mr. Bhatnagar, always like I can see definitely passion coming through you for all the technology, but most important thing is that how do you make an affordable healthcare for the key part from your side. Dr. Deshpande, I just I can say like totally inspired by watching you for last 90 minutes. I do a lot of software on a deep brain surgery, and I would also love to be side by side to see how the software really helps you possibly in planning or what modification we can make. But most important takeaway from your talk was clear, like I can say that we need to do out of box thinking, and then ICMR backing like a good science and I can say innovation projects. Thank you so much, Dr. Chandra. And I'm also very, very thankful for Novartis for giving us in a very, very simple way your innovation framework. And Kamala, you explained it very, very beautifully and with the simple words of cultural changes, really like adopting digital, really asset maximization and portfolio prioritization. I think I cannot say enough of what this 90 minutes has been to most of our participants here. I also want to thank Dr. Ravi to bring all the people together, as well as Abhay Singh to coordinate everything together. All the points has been noted. We will create some output of it, and we will send this as a recommendation from FICCI Science and Technology team to government. And definitely, we will circle back with you to take your inputs before we move on the step ahead. With that, I want to thank each and every participants who possibly like have spent this last 90 minutes attending this session. I'm pretty sure that you would have got a lot out of this session, and I look forward for your participation in coming events. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Thanks, Atul, for your kind words. Much, much appreciated. Over to you, Vikram, for your last.
No, I think this was a fantastic session. I did not realize we were up for time. I just realized at 5:26 that I've sat at one place for this long. I'm a restless person by nature. Those who know me know that. But thank you all. Dr. Deshpande, always a pleasure. And I will take you up on the OT. I have been waiting to get into OT, and I was telling my wife, I missed those days when I could actually feel that I was doing something meaningful. Rishi sir, thank you very much. Again, Dr. Kamla unfortunately had to leave. She had an appointment, so she left. But I'd like to thank her too. And obviously, thank you to Dr. Chandrasekhar. I will always remember your words. We do not discriminate. Good science, good research should win. Thank you very much for your time. And Abhay, over to you.
And last but not the least, Vikram, I would also want to thank Ajay Seth and Ramanathan Sethuraman and Shekhar Singhal for being such Shekhar Sanyal for being such wonderful participants in making all this really, really happen. So thanks, team. Thanks for all the encouragement and support that you have given us thus far. Sincerely appreciate every bit of it. Over to you, Abhay.
Thank you. I would say it was really enlightening because I'm completely was caught off the guard and not from the sector, but brought in real good insights specifically from Dr. Deshpande and on the data insights and what government is doing from the ICMR angle. I mean, we look forward to putting it together, as Dr. Vikram and Dr. Ravi was also mentioning. So we look forward to that document and see how we can add value by bringing it together. Meanwhile, I see Mr. Nayak is still online, and I would request if you would have some last parting thoughts before we say bye to each other.
And my sincere thanks to Mr. Sanjay Nayak for trusting us with this and giving us the opportunity for having this seminar. Nayak Saab, thank you so much for this opportunity. Much appreciated. I think Sanjay is on mute. Yeah.
Yes. I think he is occupied. So any which ways, I mean, on behalf of FICCI and on behalf of the Chair, Science Technology Innovation Committee, I thank you a lot to all of you, all the panelists and also the core working team. Really appreciate the effort, and we look forward to working with all of you in future as well. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, team. Take care. Bye.